Hello, welcome and welcome back. Thank you for clicking on this video. My name is Esther and I'll be showing you how I made this lovely dress. To make this dress, I used satin fabric. I also used cotton fabric for the lining, a zip, and tulle. A can or hard neck can also be used, but for this, I didn't see the need to use it because I had my desired fullness. So you will need a basic bodice. So right here I have my basic bodice both for the front and the back. The back has a zipper allowance, so I'm going to make some adjustments to the neckline. So on the neckline I'm going to mark my desired collar width. So right here I'm just marking 1 inch along the shoulder line and the neckline. So I'm just going to connect that. So you can just mark 1 inch all around. So after connecting, this is just me going ahead to check that I have 1 inch all around. So you can just confirm that. Then I am going in with my tape to measure the neckline. So right here, that collar that I've made, I'm measuring it. So if you've measured yours, divide it by 3 and mark 1/3 of it. So that curved neckline, you have to curve your tape or whatever aid you in the measurement, divide it by 3 and mark 1/3 of that measurement. Along the armhole, I'm just going to go down by 1 centimeter. You can just leave it the way it is, but I just wanted to go down just a little bit. Then connect to 1/3 of the neck measurement that you had marked. So if it was for a lady with a bust, I would have held the dart right there, but for a child, they don't have bust, so you don't really need to hold the dart for gapping. So I'm going to be repeating the same step for the back. So I'm going to mark the same neck width of 1 inch and I'm going to connect so now that I've connected it, I'm going to also measure that and I'm going to divide it by 3. So I'm going to be marking 1/3 of that neck measurement. Just like the front, I'm going to come down by 1 centimeter, but this coming down is optional. So I come down, then connect it to my new neckline. That way we've successfully made an alter neck. I'm going to be using a zipper, and on my pattern here I have a zipper allowance, but along the collar I'll be using a button, so I have to reduce that measurement to fit my button. So I'm using 1 centimeter. So I'm just indicating it that by the time I cut out the collar, which will have 1 centimeter for my seaming allowance, since I'll be using a button, the rest is going to be a zipper. Just indicates that the front is going to be cut on fold, then the shoulders of the collars are going to be joined together to have one piece for this collar. So with this, we are pretty much done with the pattern adjustment, so it's just to cut out our pattern. So now the pattern is cut out, so I'm going to join the collar and indicate where the bodice is going to meet the collar. I've already indicated that initially, so if you didn't indicate, please do well to indicate. And note that the front of this collar will be cut on fold while there is a seaming allowance for the back. So using my pattern, I'm going to cut out my fabric. So I'm cutting out my outer piece first and adding seaming allowance along the neckline. Then I'll also cut out my lining piece. Please don't forget to add seaming allowance because you'll be stitching this bodice back to the collar, so you need seaming allowance to stitch them on. So after cutting it out, right here I have 2 pieces for the front. That's the main fabric and the lining piece, and the front is cut on fold, while I have 4 pieces for the back. That is 2 for the fashion fabric and 2 for the lining piece. So I also have tulle right here, and I will be pleating the tulle on the bodice. So you can make this as tiny or as big as you want, but trust me, the more tiny it is, the cuter it looks, in my opinion though. So for the front bodice, I just find out that pleating it from the center part gives me more control of the tulle fabric. So after pleating, I just go in with my scissors and give it a bit of a trim, just trimming off some of the excess too, but not too close to my bodice. Then I go in with my thread and needle just to tack it down. So I'm just stitching this in place before taking it to my sewing machine. So you want to be sure that this lies flat. You can give it a press, but stitching comes in very handy. For the back, I decided to use another method which was slightly faster, that is pleating the down part of my bodice first before adjusting and pleating the upper part of my bodice. This was faster than the first method I did for the front, after which I also stitched it in place. Now that we have our bodice pieces pleated with tulle, so I'm just placing the back and front right side facing. I'm going to stitch them by the side, and I'm doing the same thing for the lining. Make sure you have your front and back right side facing and stitch it by the side. So after joining it by the side, just place right side facing lining and pleated bodice, stitch along the armhole only. So right here I've stitched along the armhole. I'm going to go in with my scissors and notch. You can go in with your pinky shears and trim that same allowance. So just give it a notch. Please, I only stitch the armhole, not the neckline. So after notching, just turn it right side out. You can go ahead and understitch your seaming allowance, but whatever you do, don't forget to give it a press. So basically, we are almost done with the bodice. Don't worry, we'll revisit it soon. Please, I didn't stitch the neckline once again. So we are going to set the bodice aside. So right now, I'll be working on the skirt, and on the skirt, I'll be working on the tulle part. So you will need your desired skirt length, which is basically your desired dress length minus bodice length. That will give you your skirt length. And to this skirt length, you decide how many tiers you want. For this dress, I use 2 tiers because it's a short tail length. Maybe if I was doing a full length, I would use 3 tiers. So if you want a really full dress, the more tiers you have, the more fuller your dress will be. So for 2 tiers, you will need seaming allowance. And you need seaming allowance at 3 places. That is the waistline and 2 places to join. That's joining the upper and lower tier together. So to your desired skirt length, add seaming allowance. So you can use between 1.5 to 2 inches. That's if you're working with inches. If you're working with centimeters, do well to add accordingly. And this will give you your new skirt length. And to this new skirt length, divide it by the numbers of tiers you want. Example is, my initial desired skirt length was 20 inches. I added 2-inch seaming allowance to that, and it gave me 22 inches. So I now said 22 divided by 2, which is the numbers of tiers I want. That gave me 11 inches. So each tulle I'm cutting right now is 11 inches. But you can feel free to make the upper part longer than the lower part. I'm even thinking of making a tutorial in the future with that soon. So you can play around with this, but just keep in mind that the more tier you have, the more full your dress will be. So right here my tools are cut out and I want 3 layers for the upper part. So the lower part is going to be 4 times the upper part. It means that each layer is 1:4, meaning as I'm having 3 layers for this dress, the lower part is going to have 12 pieces of the same amount of the upper part, meaning that if the upper part is 2 yards, the lower part will be 2 times 4. The ratio is 1:4. So I'm going to go ahead and gather this my lower two, join them together, all the 4 pieces, join them together, and I'll be attaching it to the upper layer of my tool. Then I'll also gather the waist to fit the waist measurements I'm working. So to the lining piece of my skirt, I'm going to be cutting an half circle. So I've placed my fabric here on fold lengthwise, so I'm just folding it again just to size the table. I'm going to go ahead, pin and secure it in place. You don't want your fabric shifting around when you are making your measurements, so it's advisable to pin and secure it in place. So next is for me to mark my skirt radius. The skirt radius is basically the waist measurement divided by 3.14 for a half circle skirt like this one. So for the radius, I like taking out my seaming allowance of about ½ an inch before marking it. That way I always get it right all the time. Now my desired skirt length. I just marked the desired skirt length, knowing fully well that while stitching to the bodice and hemming, the rest will go for seaming allowance, so I will have it slightly shorter than my tool. So you don't need to adjust or reduce seaming allowance or add to it. So now that I've marked my radius and skirt length out, I'm just going to cut it out. So I personally love to place notch at the center front of my skirt. So now that my skirt is ready, I'm going to go ahead and close the center back. So I'm going to stitch from the lower part upward to about 3 inches before the waistline. So you can mark that out because I'm going to be marking mine out as well. So 3 inches before the waistline, I'm going to stitch close and I'm going to hem the bottom of my skirt. So this is the tool. There are different ways of attaching this tool. So you can do the right side first, and of course there is no right side in tool. You can also place it overlapping it by that ½ an inch. So whatever method you choose, just make sure that you have your lower layer or lower tier attached to the upper tier. So right here I am going to go ahead and gather that upper part to fit the waist measurements. So far, these are all the pieces we've worked on. We've worked on the bodice, the tool, and the lower part of the skirt. So we can do well to stitch the skirt and the bodice together, making sure it's right sides facing. And this skirt part includes the tool. So while I'm going to be at it, I would want to prepare my collar so I can make this all a dress. So to cut my collar piece, I just took my fabric and folded it, and making sure that my center front is on fold. So I pin and secure my collar pattern. Then I go ahead to cut, giving it seaming allowance. Yes, you need seaming allowance on your collar to attach it back to the dress. So you need to add seaming allowance at that lower point. For the center back, I'd already added seaming allowance on the pattern since I'll be using a button at the center back. So for this collar, I have 2 pieces. You can do well to notch where the center front bodice will stop and where the center back bodice will stop. If you can't see the marking, don't worry. Let's go ahead and stitch the collar by placing a button loop in between the collar. So just sandwich a button loop in between the collar and pin that in place. You are going to stitch this short part, which is the center back, and you are going to stitch the neckline. So after stitching, go ahead and notch. Feel free to interface it. I didn't feel the need to interface it because the fabric has a bit of stiffness to it, so I didn't find the need to do that. So go ahead and notch, cut the corners and turn it right side out and give it a press. So here is our progress so far. We have made the collar and this is the dress. So the inside has been neatly finished, a zipper has been stitched on, and we have 1, 2, 3 layers. And the inside we only use the satin skirt. We didn't feel the need to use the lining because this was already full enough. So now to the collar. Do well to place the collar on fold once again and place your pattern on it. So you are going to notch where your bodice will stop at the center front and also where your bodice will stop at the center back, if you didn't already do that. Where the front and the back is not marked out clearly on your pattern, don't worry, all hope is not lost. Just note the center front of your dress and the center front of your bodice, and also mark it by placing the collar on the center back, opening the zip and see how it will all fit together. So if you have done that marking, do well to stitch close the other parts that are unmarked. That is the part that will be resting directly on the shoulder. Just place it right side facing again and stitch close those parts. If you have stitched close, go ahead and notch, then tuck it in and turn it right side out. So just pass the center back of your collar through that stitch part and turn it right side out. After doing this, the part of your collar that will be open is only the ones that you'll be stitching your dress to. So now to the front, you are going to note the center front and you are going to pin this in place. You can even tack it down if you're a beginner and you haven't done a project like this before. I will encourage you and stitch it first. So I like to only stitch only on one side of my collar. So I always open my collar and make sure I have right side facing. So I'm going to stitch that front, and I'm also going to stitch the back as well. Just to one layer. So at this point, your dress is basically ready. What you need to do is to use your thread and needle and tuck in those raw edges and stitch it in place. That way you're going to have a neat finishing, after which you are going to be adding button to the center back. Then you throw on your detachable belt and voila, you have your dress ready. So thank you for watching and see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.